Nobody gets everything that they want. We say that fair is a four-letter word when it comes to family law. It's not going to feel fair. And if both sides are a little bit unhappy with the outcome, it's probably the right outcome.
Hey dads, are you feeling overwhelmed by the demands of fatherhood? I get it. My name is Drew Solon. I'm the director for Dad Central Ontario, but I'm also a dad to 5 kids in a blended family situation. Balancing work, family, and everything in between can be a real struggle. You want to be the best dad you can be, but sometimes it feels like you're just barely holding it together. That's why I'm inviting you to the Fatherhood Summit. It's happening September 26th to 28th, and we've brought together some of the world's top experts to give you the tools and insights you need to succeed. This summit could change everything for you and for your family. Don't miss out. Your family's counting on you. Look forward to seeing you there.
All right, we're excited to have Jamie Davis on the show today. And so Jamie is a board certified specialist in family law, as well as a certified family financial mediator and certified parenting coordinator. She supports all areas of family law, including complex equitable distribution and child custody cases, child support, post-separation support, alimony, alienation of affection, and criminal conversation. She also handles family law contracts such as premarital, postnuptial separation, and property settlement agreements. That was a little bit of a mouthful, but I made it through. Jamie, welcome to the show. We're really glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Right. Well, we really like to start the show with a little bit of the backstory. So can you maybe tell us a little bit, how did you get into family law, and then how did you get into this focus area in terms of supporting those who are going through family breakdown?
Yeah, so ever since I was probably in elementary school, I wanted to be an attorney, and I probably didn't even really know what that meant back at the time. But I found my way to law school. And at that time, I really thought I was going to do some sort of maybe criminal defense work or something like that. And I took one family law class and really fell in love with the subject matter. And so I took all of the classes at UNC Chapel Hill, which is where I went to law school, took everything that they had to offer. And I have been practicing family law since I graduated from law school in 2001. So throughout my 23 years of practice, I guess it is now, I have found that there can be an easier way to go through this process. So many people think that divorce has to be like the War of the Roses, a zero-sum game where, you're really just basically burning the house to the ground. But in my experience, I have found that there are some things that you can do so that it doesn't have to be that way.
So when you decided to get into family law, what were friends and family's reaction? Because you said at a very young age, law is what I'm going to do. But what was friends and family's reaction when you said, this is going to be my path?
I actually had a couple of professors try to talk me out of it. I remember one in particular where when I told her where I was going to work, she was like, "Are you really sure you want to do that?" And I really felt like it was my passion and my calling, and that I could actually help real people. I wanted to work with individuals. I knew I wanted to help families, and I felt like this was the best way that I could do that.
Okay. This is, I think, it can be very challenging, as you said, right? And people are willing to say to you, "Hey, are you sure about that?" And obviously, you've lived this experience 23 years now, so you're not going anywhere. But there's something that comes up a lot, at least that we hear from many fathers, and it may be slightly different, because you're based in the U.S. But they really struggle with the feeling that the system is against fathers when it comes to family breakdown and the court system. So I guess my question to you is not that you can resolve that, but how do you support fathers who are going through this process to be able to navigate some of those situations that may come up for them?
So I will say, at least where I practice, I'm in North Carolina. Our judges tend to lean toward 50-50 equal custodial schedules, unless there is some reason why one of the parents is not fit. And so I really encourage my dad clients, if they want custody of their children, to ask for custody of their children and to fight for custody of their children. If they are used to being an equal participant and that's something they want, I think it is a realistic outcome. And I have not found, at least here, that judges are mom-centric, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you.
Getting more into that, what steps can you suggest dads take to maintain healthy relationships with their children during a divorce?
Yeah, there's a lot of things dads can do in that regard. I think one of the most important is to stay involved with your children, or to become more involved. Lots of marriages have the spouses have different roles. And so maybe dad's role was not to go to the PTA meetings or the parent teacher conferences or, whatever the children's events were. Maybe mom did that. But once you separate, it's really important to be as involved with your kids as you can be, and to start going to those things, taking the kids to soccer practice or dance lessons or whatever the things are. I also think it's really important for dads to remember not to put the children in the middle of the conflict. I think that's important for both parents to remember, actually. But it can be very difficult sometimes not to do that, especially if you're the spouse who didn't want the separation or the divorce. Emotions are running high. And judges understand that it is a very emotional time for people. But to the extent that we can allow the children to simply be children and not talk negatively about the child's other parent in front of them, not involve them in adult discussions and conversations, that's going to be what's best for the child.
Yeah. Well, as someone who's worked with, I would imagine, lots of clients over 23 years, I'm wondering if you could give advice or guidance to those who are working with legal counsel in the process, in terms of how can you work well with your lawyers, because I think I hear some horror stories there as well, and I'm sure it's not easy being in your shoes, representing them in a very tense, emotional time with lots involved. So can you give guidance on dads, and how can you work well with your lawyer?
So I think the first step is to make sure that you have found the right attorney. And what I mean by that is you should trust your lawyer like you trust your doctor. And if you don't, then you maybe need to have a consultation with someone else to see if somebody might be a better fit for you. Lawyers have different practice styles, and your personality may not mesh well with your lawyer's practice style. And that's okay. The lawyer is not going to be offended. It happens all the time. And so I think that is the first step, is to just make sure that you find a lawyer that you feel like can really represent you in the way that you want to be represented. I think another biggie is communication. You need to keep your lawyer informed about things that may be going on with your ex-spouse, especially when it comes to child custody related things. If there has been a big incident, you need to send the email or pick up the phone and call your attorney and keep him or her in the loop on that. And I also think it's important that your attorney knows your goals. So be clear with them about what it is that you want to have happen. There has been more than one occasion where I've had a client share their goals with me, and I have to tell them, I can't do that for them. The law just won't provide you with what it is that you want to have happen. And those can be tough conversations, but it's important to get ahead of that so that there is not disappointment and frustration at the end of the case.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
I want to continue on the relationship path from a legal perspective. What do you suggest to your clients in regards to communicating effectively with their ex-partner to minimize conflict?
Yeah, that is a great question. So less is more, I think, when it comes to communicating with an ex-partner. Really, it should turn into more of a business arrangement relationship as it comes to the children. Instead of sharing all of the feelings about, why you like or dislike something, it really does become more transactional, like, hey, our child needs to be at soccer practice at 5 o'clock. Are you able to take him? Do you need me to take him? That sort of thing. We often advise clients to communicate in writing, just because that helps take some of the emotion out of it. And also, it also gets rid of the constant back and forth. I mean, if it's an email, you can choose when you respond to that email. It's not, you're having to react in real time to someone on the phone. There's actually a great book that was written by a guy named Bill Eddy. It's called BIFF for co-parenting. And BIFF stands for brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And that's how your communications with your ex should be: brief, to the point. Don't engage in name calling and all of that sort of thing. And just make sure that you're relaying the pertinent information.
We can stick with the relationship piece, I guess. And from your perspective in working with clients, what's the biggest challenge that you see them experience in the process of family breakdown and separation, divorce?
I think that it can be difficulty in separating the emotion from the parts of the case that really should be a business decision. When it comes to your kids, of course, that's going to be emotional, and that is certainly understandable. And it can be very difficult to separate those things. But when it comes to the who's going to get what property, who's going to pay who how much support, all of those things should truly be a business decision, and emotion shouldn't come into it. I've worked on cases where we're talking about multi-million-dollar estates, and for whatever reason, the folks get bogged down on dividing the personal property. I mean, they're fighting over a couch or a vacuum cleaner or something that is easily replaceable. And so that's when we have the conversation about, okay, is this really cost effective for you to continue to fight over something that you can easily replace? Or is that one of those things that you just need to let go?
Right. Yeah, I'm going to ask maybe another question more related to, so, those are seemingly insignificant areas that create huge conflict. But what about when, the conflict becomes like more of a high conflict situation? How do you, again, guide and work with clients through high conflict separations?
Yeah, high conflict cases can be really tough. I think there's lots of things that you can do to try to minimize that conflict. I think there are 5 main steps that if folks will do these things, they can at least lessen the conflict to the extent that they are able. I think the first step starts at the very beginning, and you may be too far past this, that this may not help you. But if you have not approached the topic of separation with your spouse, how you do it can really set the tone for the whole process. And so it's really important to do your homework before you even have that initial conversation with your spouse. Go ahead and consult with a lawyer and figure out what things might look like if you proceed with the separation. That consultation may very well change your mind, and you may end up in couples counseling instead of proceeding with asking for a separation. And so I always say, do that first. And before you ever utter the words, I want a separation, to your spouse, make sure you mean it, because those are words that you cannot very easily take back. And so if you're on the fence and you're not sure, I highly encourage clients to go to couples counseling or even individual counseling to see if that's really what they want to do. And so I think that's how you can try to lessen the conflict at the beginning. Go ahead and get ahead of it and do some of that homework. And also remember, you've probably had a lot more time to emotionally process the idea of being separated than your spouse has. And so when you say those words to them, if you decide that's the right thing to do, they're going to need a minute. And it's going to take them some time to get to where you are in this process. And so the initial conversation is not the time to start drilling down into the details of custody schedules and money and all of the things. You need to have that initial conversation first, let them process, and then maybe come back later for a second conversation about some of those more, nuanced things of how it's going to work.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I also want to talk, and of course, can't avoid it, but how can fathers protect their financial interests during proceedings?
So I think a good way to get ahead of that is to make sure that your financial documents are in order, especially for folks that might be self-employed. Sometimes the accounting might be a little creative, or maybe there is not an accountant who has been helping with the books. Just knowing that these things are most likely going to be shared with the other side, you want to go ahead and have those in order on the front end. Also, when you are going through the process of a separation and divorce, is not the time to make major changes in how you pay yourself, where you work. It never fails that when a couple is going through a separation, all of a sudden the family business is in the toilet, not doing well. Judges see through that stuff. And so really don't make any major changes to how you handle those types of things without consulting with your attorney first.
Okay. Well, you had said there were 5 steps. In the previous question, we were talking about this idea of high conflict, and you started with this process of being fully sure and doing some of your due diligence in the front end. Can you talk maybe about the other steps? And I'm assuming those apply in any separation. They're probably still valuable, but especially valuable in high conflict. Is that assumption correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the steps can apply in most divorce situations. I do think there are a couple of exceptions. In cases of domestic violence or cases where there may be severe untreated mental health issues, these steps may not work as well. But I would say for most cases, while they might not be able to completely get rid of the conflict, they should at least be able to help lessen the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And so after you have initiated the process, and hopefully you've set a really good tone for this whole process, you're going to want to assemble a team to support you. And the folks that you're going to want on that team are a divorce attorney, a therapist, perhaps a financial advisor, maybe a divorce coach, depending on your situation, and definitely a really good friend, somebody that you can talk to about what's going on, kind of be a sounding board for you so that you're not having the wrong conversations with your ex-spouse or putting your kids in the middle. Have a buddy that you can talk to about this stuff, I think is super helpful. The third step is to get clear on what's most important to you and be willing to let go of the rest. I alluded to this earlier when I was talking about folks who were fighting over couches and things of that nature. Again, it goes back to being a business decision. Try to take the emotion out of it to the extent that you can. And in working with your lawyer, be clear on what the court can do for you, because there is no point in fighting over something that you can't get in court anyway. We find this a lot when we are trying to negotiate a settlement or we're in mediation or something like that, trying to get the case resolved. And the client really doubles down on something that they want. And so at that point, we have to have the tough conversation. Well, we can, stand our ground on that point. But if we don't settle your case, we're going to be in front of the judge. And the judge can't give you what you want anyway. So there's really no point in doubling down on that issue because it's just not going to happen. The fourth step, and I think this is the most important for dads to remember, for parents, both parents to remember, is to stay focused on what's in the best interest of your child. At the end of the day, in North Carolina, custody is decided based on what's in the best interest of the child. And so as long as you keep that in the forefront of all of your interactions with your spouse, it will serve you well. Research shows that children benefit from having both parents involved in their lives. And so you want to make sure that you're putting yourself in the very best light to have the most custodial time with your children that you can and that you want to have. And finally, I think the last step, the fifth step to hopefully get you to a divorce without destruction is to prioritize your emotional health and self-care. Divorce can be one of the most stressful life events that a person will go through. I think that on the stress scale, it's right under the death of a loved one. And so it's really important when you are going through this process that you recognize that and that there is going to be a grieving of the relationship, and do whatever it is that you do for self-care. Keep it up, whether it's exercising or hanging out with friends or going to counseling if that's what you need, or taking medication that is prescribed for you. Whatever it is that makes you feel better and helps alleviate stress, you need to really lean into that. The one thing to avoid, however, is self-medication. Resorting to drugs and alcohol in the middle of a custody case is not a great idea. And so make sure that you're getting the professional help that you need if you need it, or doing whatever it is that you need to do for self-care.
Yeah, great steps. I have really lived that. I see, for those who have listened to the show before, I've gone through a very high conflict separation and divorce, thankfully, mostly finalized as of June this year. So hearing those steps, very relevant. So if you're listening and you're going through this, I can say for sure that all those steps are really, really important. Especially that caring for yourself. The one thing I'll add, and this is for dads in particular, I think that the emotional toll that this takes and our penchant for stuffing our emotions, denying our emotions, medicating unhealthily, as you said, our emotions, is really to your detriment. So if you're going through this right now, I would say find a therapist, find a good friend, find exercise or something that allows you to purge and process the difficult emotions and accept and acknowledge that these emotions are real. Like, you can't deny them. You can't run away from them. You can't pretend they're not there, because they're actually going to do you much more harm than good if you don't actually process it. That for me is one of the most important things that I was able to do, is to process the deep emotional pain that was part of this process. I mean, as I said, I had a lot of other stuff in my situation that was really, really hard and unfortunate. Did not have to be like that at all. But anyways, so I don't want to make it about me, but I do want to reiterate, Jamie, those 5 steps I think are really crucial from my lived experience and speaking with many others who've gone through it. So I just want to say thank you. I do have a question, though, in particular about number 4, because dads staying focused on their children and the best interests of the child. And that phrase came up a lot in my case, in my situation. There's best interest of the child, but everyone has their own perspective on what best interest of the child is. You also mentioned research. And the research shows that when you have a positive involved father, and that's what Dad Central is founded on, it makes a significant difference for the benefit of the child. So I want to speak specifically, this is probably born from my situation as well, to the father who's going through a circumstance where he's looking to have as much time, and 50% is kind of the maximum amount that he can have. And his counterpart is saying that's not in the best interest of the child. How do you guide and support that? Again, you don't have context yet, but other than how do you help the father who's going through that circumstance advocate for himself, I would say?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a lot of it goes back to the roles that were established during the marriage. And I have to have this conversation with moms a lot. I'll hear, well, he didn't do that when we were married. He didn't take the kids to the doctor or the dentist or wherever. And so then we have to say, well, what was he doing? Was he working? Was it your role to take care of those things and his role to work or to do whatever it was that you had established his role to be? And if the answer is yes, just because he didn't do those things during the marriage doesn't mean he's not capable of doing those things. It means that you all had a division of labor and that you took care of the tasks that you had and he took care of the tasks he did. But now that you are getting separated, that changes. And so for dads who want to have as much custodial time as they can, again, it goes back to being as involved with your kids as you can be, and also taking some of those steps to not put the kids in the middle of the conflict. And some of it's not really intuitive. Simple little things like saying to your child, I really miss you when you're at the other parent's house. You think that you're being nice to the child and you're just letting them know that when they're not there, you miss them. But really, you're putting a little bit of a burden on them. You're making them feel responsible for your emotional health. And in extreme cases, the child can start to feel like they have to take care of the parent, which is the last thing that you want the child to feel. And so it's really important to be as positive as you can about the time the child spends with their other parent, to encourage that time. And hopefully your co-parent is doing the same thing for you, and making it a positive experience for your child in both houses. At the end of the day, we just want the kids to be kids and to not have to worry about a separation that they didn't ask for. Those are issues for the grown-ups to work out and for the kids to just keep being kids. So again, to the extent you can avoid putting the child in the middle, that's best. Don't use the kids as messengers. You may not want to talk to your ex-spouse about anything ever. And I get it. I've been there. But your kid can't be the messenger for you. You're the adult. You need to be able to relay the messages to your co-parent. And it can be in writing. Let's take some of that emotion out of it. Do it in email or text message, or maybe you use a parenting app with your co-parent, and you can use that as well. But your child doesn't need to be the one asking whether or not he's going to be able to go to somebody's birthday party or something like that. Something else that you can do is to not discuss fun things for the child with the child until you've talked to the other parent about it. And what I mean by that is, let's say that your child got an invitation to go to a birthday party, but that birthday party occurs during your co-parent's custodial time. Before you get the child really excited about going to this birthday party, make sure you've asked the other parent, hey, just wanted to let you know, we got this invitation for him to go to the birthday party. It's during your time. Will he be allowed to go? And if the answer is absolutely yes, I'll take him, then great. Talk about the birthday party. But otherwise, try not to get the child excited for something that may or may not happen.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think you've highlighted some of it, but you may want to go a little bit deeper. Some tips to our dads about co-parenting during the proceedings and then post-proceedings.
Yeah, so co-parenting can be challenging, as you can imagine, when emotions are running high. I think it is important to do as much as you can in writing. Like I said before, there's a couple of reasons. One, it takes the emotion out. But two, if you're still involved in court proceedings, you're going to have a record of what you said and what your co-parent said. And a lot of times those emails and messages can be exhibits that your lawyer can use to hopefully help your case in court. The other thing is to try to avoid name calling, try to avoid rehashing the past and the reasons for the separation. I see this a lot with my clients who were cheated on. They have a really hard time getting over that indiscretion in the marriage, and it comes up a lot. And it tends to cloud how they view their ex-spouse as a co-parent. You can't let it, just because your wife might have been a bad wife to you doesn't necessarily mean she's a bad mom to her kids. And so, it's really important to try to separate those two things. And so, if you're not really worried about your co-parent being able to care for the children, if the children are safe with the co-parent, try not to let your anger over an affair cloud your judgment about those types of things. And I think that will serve you well in the long run.
I also want to just add another conversation piece for you to chat about. Fathers bringing the right mindset when it comes to mediation. Because I'm sure many dads say, I deserve this, I deserve it, but making sure that they're not in the right, getting them in the right mindset, because again, this is like a business transaction, and a lot of fathers may not have that experience. And if they do, business world and family world, when it comes to mediation is two different things.
Yeah, so that's a great point. It really is about setting expectations, especially when it comes to mediation. And so I like to have conversations with my clients about what could happen if your case goes to court, and what it is that you want to fight for and ask for, and is it something that you're likely to get? And if it is, then we have the conversation about, okay, well, there's a cost associated with that. You're going to have to pay legal fees. And there's also the mental and emotional cost. There's the time that you're going to have to take away from work to gather all of the documents that lawyers like to ask you to gather together, to appear, to maybe have your deposition taken, to appear in court. All of those things, there's a cost there. And so then we have the conversation about, is it worth it? Like, is that cost worth it to you? And if it is, maybe the case doesn't settle in mediation if the other side is not willing to compromise. But in most cases, it is worth it to consider compromise positions just in terms of the time and the cost. And really going into mediation knowing that nobody gets everything that they want. We say that fair is a four-letter word when it comes to family law. It's not going to feel fair. And if both sides are a little bit unhappy with the outcome, it's probably the right outcome. That means both of you made some compromises to get the case done and to spare your children the stress of their parents being involved in a court case.
Drew?
Well, I guess my question might be more about setting yourself up, and when is it valuable to have something like a prenuptial agreement?
So I think that a premarital agreement can be beneficial for a lot of couples. I think there is a misconception that it is only for the wealthy. I don't think that's true. I think especially for folks who may be going into a second marriage and already have children, a premarital agreement can be a great way to take control over your assets and go ahead and decide what's going to be marital property versus what's going to be your separate property that you get to keep. In North Carolina, there are certain inheritance rights that you acquire by virtue of the fact that you're married. And in that premarital agreement, you can go ahead and waive those rights so that you have control over the assets that you're able to pass to your children upon your death. And a premarital agreement can be a great way on the front end to try to minimize some of that conflict in the event that there is a separation. You go ahead and you set forward what the rules are going to be. But the only thing that can get tricky is that premarital agreements here cannot deal with child custody or child support. And so you're still going to have to deal with those issues if you end up having children with your prospective spouse. But the premarital agreement can be a great way to go ahead and get ahead of the property and the alimony issues.
Okay. Thank you. Ed, back to you.
Yeah. This has been very, very helpful. Also, what from a legal perspective do you suggest to your clients when it comes to co-parenting, post-divorce?
Oh, wow. I always say take the high road. And if you do, it will serve you well. In the moment, it can be very tempting to send the snarky text message and it makes you feel really good to get a jab in. But at the end of the day, that doesn't serve your kids. And so don't do it. If you need to write it so you get it out of your system, just write it and don't send it and then delete it and then write a nice one. I have some clients that they like to send me their emails first and they say, Jamie, does this pass the snark check? And if not, we rewrite it until it sounds good and then they send it.
I like that, the snark check. Good stuff. But it's good. It's a great suggestion though.
Oh, I did it many times. Many times. Hey,
there you go.
What do you think about this? Many times they sent it back correcting me. Well received. Okay, sounds good. It's a good practice. Very good practice.
Absolutely. Fantastic. I also want to say, and I think you've mentioned it, but any other common pitfalls that you have seen through your evaluated experience fathers get themselves into while going through a situation like this?
I think the biggest one is that there is a feeling that there is a winner and a loser and that you have to win. There is no winning in family law. I mean, at the end of the day, a win is you have half of your stuff and half of the time with your kids. Okay. So there is no winner. And just trying to get out of that mentality, I think, is really important. I also can't stress enough, and I know I've said this earlier, but pick your battles. Everything does not have to be a battle. Sometimes you might not agree with it, but let it go because it doesn't matter. I think those are two of the bigger ones. And then again, just letting emotions get in the way. I think that's another pitfall, and it's really hard, but you got to put that business hat on, and at least for the financial part of the case, make a sound business decision.
Drew, anything else?
I think that's, for me, lots of information, lots of good guidance and direction. So very helpful from my perspective at this stage. Good conversation.
Thank you so much. Well, Jamie, where can people get in touch with you?
Well, my law firm website is divorcestough.com. I host the Year in a Day podcast that is available on the website and also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcasts. I've written a book by the same name, also A Year in a Day, Divorced Without Destruction, available on Amazon. And on social media, you can find me at Jamie H. Davis Attorney on Instagram and Facebook.
Well, thank you so much. We will include all that information in the show notes from this great conversation. Jamie, I want to say thank you so much for taking time from your busy and productive work to share with our family. And if there's anything we can do at Dad Central to help you along the way, we're here to help you out. So as always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and remember to give yourself grace.